How is this kid still in middle school?
This is when middle school should be over for Greg Heffley. Mathematically speaking, this is when his middle school experience should have ended, and it just doesn't. Instead, it keeps on going. So this right here, I knew this book was important. This book mattered.
Interesting. But I'm still unsatisfied with this answer.
Some of the attitudes and behaviors most often associated with sociopathy include a grandiose sense of self, acts of manipulation, pathological lying, a lack of guilt or shame, and general unreliability. This brings us to Jeff Kinney's popular children's book series, Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Interesting. Interesting. School traditionally starts the day after Labor Day. And this book was published in 2007. Let me check my calendar on that. What? The day after Labor Day is a Tuesday in September 2007. And the day school starts in this book is a Tuesday. Does that mean that this book takes place in 2007? Is evidenced by this calendar? I mean, it's not like Labor Day is on the first Monday of September every year. Labor Day is on the first Monday of September every year. Why can't I connect the dates? I won't ever be able to figure this out. How is Greg Heffley still in middle school?
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got myself into this situation. Well, unless you have been paying attention to the past few minutes of this video giving you a pretty good idea of what's been going on, here's another unnecessary introduction to this video that only exists because I wanted an excuse to use the Wimpy Jones exposition transition, since he is half the reason this video exists in its present form. It all started 4 or 5 years ago when I felt the need to question a holy book.
We're not going through all that again. Hello and welcome to the Minefish. Cray here. And today I have found something that will completely change the field of research for a book series that is incredibly important to us all. That being, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Now, you might be wondering why I'm finally choosing to throw my hat into the ring involving this series, after YouTubers the likes of Wimpy Jones and the Roundtables, and subreddits like Loded Diper and other communities have already long passed their prime. I mean, the property has already had an iceberg video or two made on it at this point. There can't possibly be much more to say. But you see, I have kept a secret for a long time. I uncovered a lead to something that could spark a completely new way to look at this franchise. One might say I discovered the tip of the iceberg to something so complex that I am only finally able to get this video out to you today. I have found exactly when, to the date, in our timeline, our calendars, Diary of a Wimpy Kid takes place. And after reviewing my notes from long ago and drastically expanding my research, I have found undeniable proof to show that this amount of precision in dates must have been entirely intentional by the author Jeff Kinney. And to clarify to those who might think that this video is still just going to be revisiting the timeline explained by the Roundtable or many others, well, I am using their same methods and timeline. But they never went to the depths of which I have. For I found a way to accurately date when each event in this series takes place. Therefore, this is the true Diary of a Wimpy Kid timeline.
We are Loded Diper!
School now, except 4 more books, which means that he is still in middle school. How? I mean, basically for the round table, in the long haul, he suggests that he's dead. Or maybe Greg Heffley was in 4th grade all along.
You know, maybe we should be paying this kid some attention.
I mean, in mine. I mean, yours is possibly different. But mine starts in 4th grade.
So, this channel, Nitrous Plays, has a video giving his theory on how Greg Heffley could possibly still be in middle school. He suggests that if you assume Greg in the first book is starting the 4th grade instead of 6th grade, then you would be able to carry him all the way up to 8th grade with Wrecking Ball. That way, Greg wouldn't contradict any timeline since he could still be in middle school. I feel like this is definitely the foundation we need to go off of for the true Minefish timeline. Now, he also has some important and timely commentary on Old School.
I mean, I actually don't know why the 10th book is... Okay, I'm not going to say because... racism. Yeah. But I just don't know why all the other books are colorful except for Old School. It's because it's possibly him moving on, keep writing his afterlife journals, right? Or anything.
Yeah. This video somehow simultaneously uses its own idea for a timeline alongside the Roundtable's. The Roundtable's timeline takes the actual context from the first book and places Greg in the 6th grade, like Greg implies in his diary. Okay, don't worry, this is not actually what this video is based on. I just wanted a decent transition, and I guess I should finally be getting into what this video is all about. Basically, a few years ago, I noticed how the first Diary of a Wimpy Kid book starts on a Tuesday, and it's described to be the first day of middle school for Greg. The book also states that this happens in September. Seeing this, a much younger Cray became curious about if there was a way to prove when Diary of a Wimpy Kid takes place. Using this information about the start of Greg's school year, I looked up when school traditionally starts. I found that in many cases, it starts the day after Labor Day. Now, this got me thinking. Maybe I could look at calendars from past years, find one that matches up with the day after Labor Day being a Tuesday, and use that as the starting point for finding what year in our world every single book in the series takes place. There are a lot of years to check though, so which one do I start with? Well, I saw that the book was published in 2007. Maybe that would make a good starting point? I proceeded to look up a September 2007 calendar, and it was just my luck that Labor Day was on a Monday that year, meaning that the day after was, obviously, a Tuesday. That was it. I thought I had solved the case of when this book was taking place, and concluded that I had all the evidence I would ever need, and no further investigation into other years would be necessary. I went on to make a timeline for the entire series by referencing each month from book to book until I got stumped with Old School, since Greg would be entering high school at that point. And we all know how that went. Yes, this timeline was identical to the one the Roundtable created in his video, but with one exception. I had the years that each book took place in our world. I know, so much cooler. But then there was a problem. A few days later, I realized that Labor Day falls on the first Monday of September every year. And with that, I basically gave up on this idea and didn't make it into a video. I could have just done a video of the timeline, but then the Roundtable stole my idea and got their video out before I cared enough to make mine. In addition, I also found that plenty of people online had already put together that same timeline anyway. I didn't have anything new to add to the conversation since I didn't have the dates. So that was the case. Until this year. I was looking through my old notes from my original research and started thinking about how cool it would be if I could actually date, down to the day, every single event in the series. The problem was, I still didn't have any evidence of what years the books were taking place in, or at least what calendar was being used as a template. I decided to move on from book 1 and look through the pages of the rest of the series. Then I finally found something. But back in book 1. I definitely didn't look into every single other book for some sort of evidence, only to go back to book 1 and notice a very obvious detail. It was because of a sign.
All over the place, exploded diaper. In your face, exploded diaper. We can't breathe.
Halloween is the key to it all.
Gasp.
That was it. Halloween is a very significant point in Book 1. Halloween, like many holidays, occurs on the same date every year, that being the 31st of October. I just needed to look at what day of the week Halloween occurred in Book 1, then I'd have my template of years to reference. Now, something does throw a bit of a wrench in things with these books and most holidays. You see, they're often labeled by name in the books instead of just the typical days of the week, which is the case for Halloween in Book 1. So it seemed like we're stuck again, but luckily there is actually a solution to this. Two solutions, in fact. Looking earlier in the novel, we can find that the first day recorded in the diary in October, a Monday, is the first day of the month, as it explicitly states that Halloween is 30 days away. Now, I could choose to go through a calendar and figure out what day Halloween must be on if the first day of October is on a Monday, but hold on a second. The day Halloween falls on is no longer necessary. I now know that the first day of October in this year is on a Monday, and therefore have the first piece of evidence I would need. This is actually the progression of mental gymnastics and rabbit holes I went down to get to this point. So now we know that this book is hopefully only using a calendar in which October 1st is on a Monday. I couldn't find a place on the internet that you could just plug in a date and day of the week and it'll show what years it's fallen on, so I had to figure out one year that had the same layout for October and just look for every year that used that same calendar. Let's start with 2007, just like I did years ago. Holy crap. Well, isn't that a coincidence? Anyway, here are all the possible years with the same calendar as 2007. Since the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books feature technology that wouldn't have existed before the 21st century, such as cell phones later on in the series, I think it's safe to assume that the series has to be taking place in a year past 2000. Also, I don't really see a reason why Jeff Kinney would have been referencing a calendar past 2020, so we'll just be using the years of 2001, 2007, 2012, and 2018. Now, I'm not saying that any dates outside of the range of 2000 to 2020 are completely ruled out, but I'm just going to use these four for right now, since it means I don't have to reference so many calendars later on when we get into leap years and stuff. I will still need more confirmation to show that it's actually one of these years. Still, you're probably thinking that this one piece of evidence isn't nearly enough to prove Jeff Kinney was referencing this form of calendar when writing Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Well, let's just see if there are any contradictions as we go through the first book. For example, let's go right back to Halloween. So, in this calendar, Halloween would have fallen on a Wednesday. The previous day recorded in the diary is a Tuesday, and it can be reasonably inferred that it is the day before Halloween. So, that means that this part of the book is consistent with the theory that I'm using a calendar with October 1st being on a Monday. One last thing I want to go over before we get too deep into Diary 1. I'd like to talk about the technique I'll be using to analyze and figure out the dates. Basically, I'm going to be first filling in the dates recorded in the book into my calendar chronologically. For example, if there's a Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and Tuesday listed in the book respectively, then I would initially fill in each spot in my calendar from the beginning of the month like this. I'll do that for the entire month in the book. This method leaves room for the possibility of there being too many days recorded in a month such that they overflow my calendar. If this happens, that means that the calendar I'm using contradicts the book. This overflowing of days could make it so that no month could contain the days recorded, and that would indicate that Jeff Kinney probably wasn't even referencing a calendar at all while writing. Now, with all of that hopefully somewhat understood, I think it's time we give the date of every event in Greg Heffley's first diary. Journal.
You told us that we were losers and we can't do nothing right. You said we'd never make it, but just look at us tonight.
Greg's first day of middle school was on Tuesday, September 4th, 2007. That is the first event ever to be recorded in Greg's diaries. Okay, I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We will be getting to the reason why I'm pretty well certain the series starts in 2007, but first I'll go over how I got to September 4th. So you could just look at the calendar template I'm referencing, or you could figure it out the fun way. Let's start with the facts. School starts on the day after Labor Day in this universe. We can more than assume this, since every book in the series that features Greg's first day of school is on a Tuesday in September, always the first Tuesday recorded in that month. Labor Day is always the first Monday in September, meaning that the day after it is, of course, a Tuesday. Let's fill in that blank space for Tuesday, the 4th, in my calendar. Now we can start to fill in every consecutive day after that. The next day recorded is a Wednesday, so we'll put that as the day after, the 5th, for right now. If you order every recorded day in September, this is how they would fill out in the calendar. This would be an immediate way to know if I was using the wrong calendar or if Jeff Kinney wasn't paying attention to one. As you can see, the days do not overflow the month. With that, I could even fill in the days backwards through the calendar, starting with Greg attempting to display his student government posters on Monday, September 24th. It still fills in the month without contradiction. Still, this isn't definitive proof that the September calendar was being referenced when writing this book. It could be a coincidence, and there are probably other September calendars that might allow these days to still fit in. Nonetheless, I found nothing yet to disprove my claim. Let's continue. October gets a little trickier. Here are the days I was able to fill in without a reasonable doubt. These are the dates that I could not. Why can't I just plug them in? Well, they don't fill up the month quite as well as September does. They thankfully don't overflow it, but there is a missing week in the book where nothing is recorded. There is not enough context in the story to know where in the month this missing week lies, but these are all the possible dates they could occur. It can be inferred, though, that these days occur over the same weekend. Anyway, we still have no contradictions with October. Moving into November, we come across our next significant piece of evidence that supports this calendar. The first recorded day, a Thursday, explicitly shows that it happened the day after Halloween, which was the last day of October. If you remember from earlier, I found that Halloween in this book happened on a Wednesday, so this aligns perfectly. I went ahead and tried filling in the days for the month and they fit exactly, just like with September. This is when I began to feel very confident that I was onto something with this calendar theory. We run into our first minor issue with December, though. In the first day recorded, a Thursday, Greg states that his Wizard of Oz school performance is a couple of days away. Now, the next day recorded is the school performance, but it's on a Tuesday, at least 5 days after the fact. This generally doesn't affect my theory, though it does leave suspicion for Greg to be an unreliable narrator, or that Jeff Kinney dared to have a flaw in the continuity of this masterpiece. For now, I'll just guess that Greg hasn't yet been corrected on the difference between a couple and a few. Carrying on, you can fill up the December calendar perfectly, just like in September and November. But even better, the calendar fills in just right for when Christmas break would have started for Greg, and when the holiday itself occurs. In addition, New Year's Eve fits in just right. We have gotten through the first half of the book and are yet to contradict the calendar for 2001, 2007, 2012, and 2018. Now, I have kept you waiting for a while now on how I'm so sure that this book starts in 2007. Don't worry, we're almost there. Real quick though, I would like to mention something that I feel should take 2001 out of consideration. September 11th is a date I was able to record in this book. On that day, Greg's dad makes him go outside to be active. He ends up just going over the rallies to play video games and runs through a sprinkler on the way back. Just, if this were 2001, I don't see Frank Heffley having this expression at the end of the day when Greg gets home, no matter how happy he was to think Greg actually got exercise. Alright, I think it's time to move into the next year in this book, meaning January could be occurring in 2008, 2013, or 2019. Notice how 2008 would have been a leap year? Keep that in mind. Using context in the book, I was able to place all of these dates in the January calendar, but I couldn't definitively place these two dates for the same reason as the ones in October. Still, the days do not overflow the month. February was the hardest to figure out since there are only 6 days recorded. I was able to split these days into two groups that are consecutive within themselves, but that was about it. I am deeply sorry that I am unable to verify the date that the first Zooey Mama comic was conceived, but here are all the possible dates that it could have been. Thankfully, there are no contradictions in this month to the calendar I'm using. Actually, I should start saying calendars now. February would have had a leap day in 2008, so keeping that in mind. 2013 and 2019 are now using a different calendar than 2008. With that in consideration, if I could find evidence of something that contradicts one of these calendars but not the other, then my options for when this book takes place would be narrowed down even further. So, instead of moving straight ahead and listing off all the possible dates on two different calendars, I'm going to jump forward a little bit and show you what I discovered. The last recorded day in April is a Wednesday. The first recorded day in May is a Thursday. Now, I could just assume that the weekdays are consecutive of each other, but I need to be certain about this. If you look at the context of the days, they clearly take place in the same week. Greg begins his aspirations to be labeled as class clown in the yearbook on Wednesday, and then continues to describe his plans to achieve this goal on that Thursday. While it's a slight possibility he could have waited a week or two to develop a plan, the last picture on Wednesday shows a teacher sitting on a thumbtack. He's thinking about how to perform that very thing on Thursday. Okay, can we just conclude that these days are consecutive of each other? That being the case, we can state that Wednesday must fall on April 30th, and Thursday on a May 1st. So, which calendar aligns with this? The 2008 one. We can now make the claim that this book must be beginning on a year with Halloween on a Wednesday, along with having a leap year the following year. Here are all those possible years outside the bounds of 2000 to 2020. Yeah, the two closest alternative years are 1979 and 2035. Those are well outside my logical boundaries. I don't know about you. That is why I am incredibly confident that a 2007 to 2008 calendar was being referenced while making this book. But before I close this case, let's finish things off to ensure there aren't any contradictions. March was a little difficult to figure out, but I was actually able to give a date to every day recorded, even though the days don't fill up the month. I managed to do this by using the context in the text again. That mainly being that the worm incident with Greg and the kindergarteners is referenced to happen a week prior to when it is described. And it would have had to still happen in March as to not contradict events in February. With that, I could fill in the rest of the days. April was kind of annoying since, well, pretty much all of its events occur at the end of the month once you link it with the beginning of May, as I explained earlier. Basically, I was unable to date the first day recorded, so here you go. Everything else slotted in at the end of the month. May once again had this problem, except I was actually able to date every single day since they all occur at the end of the month surrounding the climax, with the cheese. I can be certain that Greg ate the cheese on May 26, 2008. This is because the first day of June references this event happening a week prior, meaning it would have had to happen in the last week of April. At last, this book ends on that day in June, Friday, June 6, 2008. There was not a single contradiction in the first Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, and with things aligning so perfectly with holidays and the leap year, Jeff Kinney must have been referencing his calendar when writing. Maybe it wasn't his intention for the book to be set in 2007, but the fact that he cared about this amount of detail points towards the idea that the book probably takes place around this time. After recovering from the exhaustion of all this, I dove straight into Roderick Rules to see if it retained the consistency of its predecessor.
Exploded diaper all over the place. Exploded diaper in your face.
Look at this. See those sticky notes? They mark the date of every single day in these two books. I think I have used more sticky notes on this project than anything else before in my life combined. So, you think it's time we enter Roderick Rules? As stated in the first day of the diary, Roderick Rules takes place the year after the start of Book 1, meaning we would still be in 2008. September was surprisingly easy to date, since the days filled up the month fully. For good measure, I noted that the first day is a Monday and the next is a Tuesday, following the idea of Labor Day and the start of school. That Tuesday is Greg's first day of school in this book. October, though, is when things started to go really downhill. I started just filling in the dates naturally and found that it went well over the amount of weeks October had in any calendar. This didn't really mean I was using the wrong calendar, it just means that Jeff Kinney wasn't paying attention. Or was he? After scouring over the book for a good bit, I developed a pretty solid theory for how this could actually work. And it's not some ridiculous conspiracy. You see, October starts out with a storyline revolving around Greg pranking Chirag by getting everyone to pretend Chirag didn't exist. This whole thing goes over the course of a week, Monday through Saturday. Now, if I were Jeff Kinney, trying to pay attention to a calendar while still having a coherent story, I would find myself with a problem with this book. The book only covers September through December, and the amount of days allows me to easily fill up every calendar using a specific method that I'm getting to. You see, if you take the first 2 days recorded in October and instead act like they're still being recorded in September, you can actually still fit them into the September calendar. Then, the third day recorded in October, a Thursday, would take place on October 2nd if you just follow things normally from there. While I was skeptical of this idea, I tried filling up the calendar using the book this way, and it actually allowed me to fill October all the way up to the 29th instead of overflowing. So, why does it make sense that this works? Well, if I were Jeff Kinney and ran into this problem where I have a storyline that needs to occur in between September and October, because there aren't any other places to put it, I also might feel like it seems a little choppy to suddenly change the month in the middle of the series of events. Instead, he could just act like it all starts in October because it's not like anyone's going to be looking this closely. That's my best explanation as to why, because if I use this way of looking at the dates, then everything else falls into place for the rest of the book. Especially November. November aligns by far the best out of the months in this book, since its days fill up the month precisely, and Thanksgiving works just as it should in 2008. It's always the last Thursday of November, and the Thursday in this book matches that spot exactly. December, on the other hand, does bring some problems. Problems in continuity, at least. The days fill up the month without any contradictions, but the characters are still in school on what would be the day after Christmas. There are way too many weeks in this month to happen for Christmas break to not have begun. I think Jeff Kinney just decided that he wasn't going to care too much because it's not like some kid was really trying to accurately fill a calendar with the events of his books. Still, there are plenty of open spots where he could have crammed the events a little tighter together. Nonetheless, there is a way to look at this diary without any calendar contradictions, though there are certainly contradictions in the context of the story. Now we're going to move into Book 3, which would be starting in January 2009, as long as Jeff Kinney is still looking at calendars to some extent. Let's see how that goes.
Loded Diper, we can't be stopped. Exploded Diper, your head is gonna pop.
Why, Jeff Kinney? Why?
Trying to date the last straw was when I was hit with cruel, hard reality. I began with January, and right away, as if Jeff Kinney was wanting to mercifully stop any future endeavors from wasting any time at all, I found that the dates in January well overflowed any calendar. But I refused to think that this spelled defeat, so I continued into February. I tried letting January's overflowing day carry into February, but found that it then contradicted with Valentine's Day, which is directly labeled in the book. Beginning to panic, I started from the first day of February and went forward with that in my calendar. I was brought temporary relief in finding Valentine's Day to align correctly, but then was devastated to discover the context of that day. My 2009 calendar showed that it had to be on a Saturday, and it pains me to say it, but Greg went to school that day. Maybe Jeff Kinney had completely stopped caring about the timing of events relative to the calendar, like in Roderick Rules with Christmas break seeming to never happen, but I was losing hope. What was the point anymore? Still, I continued forward. February didn't overflow, but I could have never anticipated what came next. I began going through March to find that the second recorded day in the month was Easter Sunday. There was another holiday. This would have to save me and show me what direction I needed to be taking things. I looked ahead a little and found that there was a second Sunday listed, and that was the last recorded day for the month. Easter is probably the weirdest holiday and how its date is decided each year. In short, the earliest it can happen is the second to last Sunday in March, and since the book records a Sunday after Easter, that means it can only lie in that second to last weekend slot. In a 2009 calendar, that is March 22nd. Easter fell on April 12th that year in our world. I began to feel like it was all over. Grasping at straws, I thought that maybe Jeff Kinney had made a mistake. Maybe he thought March 22nd was Easter Sunday because he glanced at the wrong calendar or something. I began my research. With one Google search, I found that Easter had not fallen on March 22nd since 1818. It would not again until the year 2285. I was devastated. Clearly, a 2009 calendar was not being used. I tried to figure out what one he must have been using instead. The nearest year anywhere between 2000 past 2030 that filled the criteria of Easter Sunday being placed on the second to last Sunday of the month was 2008. It made no sense for Jeff Kinney to be using that calendar, but I decided to try anyway because there weren't any other options. I returned to February and discovered that Valentine's Day would, in fact, occur on a school day, Thursday, that year. With hesitant confidence, I started filling in the dates from the beginning of February. And with that, I came to my final roadblock. The days recorded in the book fill up past Valentine's Day in the calendar before I reach the labeled holiday in the book. That was the last straw.
What's your favorite song?
You know you love me, I know you care. Just shout whenever, and I'll be there. You are my love, you are my heart. We will never, ever, ever be apart. And now it's like, baby, 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 oh, like baby, 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 oh, like baby, 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 oh. I thought you'd always be mine.
Right. I need to dazzle her. We need to crank it up. Full diaper! Hit that button!
For you, I would have done whatever. And I just can't believe we ain't together. I want to play it cool, but I'm losing you. I'll buy you anything. I'll buy you any ring. And now it's pieces. Baby, fix me. Shake me till you wake me from this bad dream. I'm going down, 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 down. Just can't believe Heather is gonna be around. I'm like, baby, baby, baby. Oh, like baby, baby, baby. Oh, like baby, baby, baby. Oh, I thought you would always be mine.
As opposed to the misleading title of this part, I am not, in fact, going to be trying to date the ugly truth. And I didn't forget that Dog Days comes before it. Even if it did happen to jump back into the consistency of this timeline's dates, Jeff Kinney has lost my respect for failing to continue referencing a calendar, or at least keeping some semblance of continuity to the dates of these beloved stories. I used to think that this series, up through the long haul, was still holy, only falling from grace with old school. But now that I have come across these contradictions, starting in Roderick Rules and drastically amplifying in The Last Straw, now that I have come across these ugly truths, I have become a purist and singularly respect the one and only true Diary of a Wimpy Kid. But, hold on. I may not be able to date anything else, but I could still do the timeline. Isn't that what this video was all about? The roundtable only went up through the meltdown, so I've still got 2 more books to place. And, since Jeff Kinney has abandoned me in my efforts to make these books, I think I should show him by actually paying attention to detail. I'll give the years of each diary going forward just to emphasize how much he is destroying Greg as a consistent character. After all, this is the true timeline, and the ugly truth is that it's got to get a bit messy.
Alright, some of you probably already know this series of things up to at least the meltdown, so this is going to be a lightning round. First, a recap for the initial 3 books. Diary 1 goes over Greg's entire first year of middle school from September 2007 to June 2008. Roderick Rules starts later in 2008 in September again. It goes through December, where it is picked up by The Last Straw in 2009 from January to June. Entering new territory for myself, Dog Days starts right after The Last Straw in June again. It ends in August. The Ugly Truth begins that following September and ends in November. This marks the end of what were apparently Jeff Kinney's initial plans for the series, but I guess he decided to keep going. Cabin Fever continues November from where The Ugly Truth left off, and ends on Christmas in December. Finally moving into 2010, the third wheel begins in January and goes into February. Hard Luck takes place that next month in March and concludes in April. Next, we have the last semi-consistent book in the series before things really took a turn for the worst, The Long Haul. This book takes place solely in the month of June. Now, as many of us already know, Old School is when it was made apparent that the series probably wasn't following any coherent timeline anymore. Greg should be entering high school at this point, but he is for now on shown to be a perpetual middle schooler. And you can keep your conspiracy theories to yourself about Greg either being dead or held back a grade. I'm just going to be laying out what the book's months describe. It's at least something that every book still takes place in the following months from the previous book. Alright, let's finish this. Old School starts in September and ends in October. Double Down picks up the same month and goes into November. The Getaway takes place only in December. Next, The Meltdown finally turns the series to a new year in January 2011. It goes through February. All of these books have been previously tracked by others online, but now it's time for me to put in my 2 cents. Or 2 books, quite literally. Wrecking Ball begins in March and ends in June. This is surprisingly the longest period of time a diary is covered since The Last Straw. At long last, the deep end skips over Greg's first 2 months of summer and takes place in August 2011. We have book 16, Big Shot, coming out next month, so we have yet to see which month or months it actually covers. For now, we can only expect Greg to be starting what should be his sophomore year, but in actuality will likely just be another ambiguous year in middle school. I hope I doubled down enough in this timeline. Now we just have to wait for more. So yeah, I did the timeline. The true timeline. I figured it out, despite the inconsistencies. Hard luck for you, Jeff Kinney. Alright, despite the fact that I have been acting like I've done all this work myself, I'd still like to credit some other sources that have helped motivate and confirm this project. The first being the Roundtable's video on the Wimpy Kid timeline released back in 2019. I was initially somewhat disappointed that someone had gotten a video out on something that I had developed a theory on sometime beforehand, but then it gave me some confidence in the fact that I had actually developed the right ideas surrounding a potential semi-consistent timeline in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid universe. About a year before the Roundtable's video, I also came across Mumpky Jones's video about Greg being a sociopath. This was actually the first Mumpky Jones video I ever saw, and he's honestly a YouTuber that has motivated me in several ways to put passion into my videos. There are also several posts on Diary of Wimpy Kid forums, such as r/Loded Diper, that assisted me in my research, that are all linked below. They all go into different directions than I did, but I'd like to reassure you that I am certainly not the only one who has poured hours into analyzing this series. I will mention, though, the Diary of a Wimpy Kid Wiki's timeline page is in serious need of an update. They seem to believe that the first book begins in 2003, and if you've been paying any attention to this video, then I shouldn't have to explain why that's a problem. Just make me a moderator or something, and I'll fix it. Anyway, at long last, we've made it to the end of this journey. Thank you for watching this video. Maybe, just maybe, subscribe, like, and all that. This video took a lot of work. But if you were able to get through well over half an hour of a guy talking about Diary of a Wimpy Kid and calendars, then I think your viewership was probably good enough. Happy 6-year anniversary of the channel, by the way. I'm Cray, your host for the Minefish, and see ya! You know, I really should have tried to find a way to date this, the movie Diary, and those weird Rowley spin-offs. Actually, I don't know if I'm ever gonna touch those Rowley spin-offs. Wait a second. There's a third Loded Diper song? We're coming through your speakers, running through your town. We're pouring through your headphones and your eyes are turning brown. We're pumping up the volume and we can't be stopped. Your brains are leaking out your ears, your head's about to pop. This is a diaper overload, and you better run for cover, 'cause we're about to explode. This is a diaper overload, and your mother's gonna shudder when this diaper hits the road. Pressure's building up now and we're about to bust out. Rockin' stadiums, gymnasiums, if you're feeling a shout. Yes, it's a diaper! A diaper overload, and you ain't been this covered since the last time it snowed. This is a diaper! A diaper overload, and you better run for cover, 'cause we're about to explode! That piece of cheese has been sitting on the court since last spring. Since last spring. I swear, if he was in 7th grade the whole time...
Curse you, Jeff Kinney!